All right, so this is the debate happened just the other night between Hasan and Asmongold about the campus protests currently going on, where a bunch of university students have set up encampments on campus and are refusing to leave. And they're requesting humanitarian aid, coming in many different forms. Sometimes med kits, sometimes food, sometimes HIV test kits, sometimes Plan B. They're asking for lots of things. Anyway, police have started removing a lot of them. They've been cleared out, a lot of these places. So, and Asmongold's been sort of laughing about it on stream, laughing at the people getting torn away, pointing out the fact that people shouldn't be restricted from accessing facilities at their university because of some obstinate students or obstinate protesters. And Hasan's got an issue with that, obviously. So we'll take a look. We'll see how it goes. We probably have it on 1.5, I think, just to get through it at a decent speed.
And so there were lines even that he had.
Wait, Martin Luther King also participated in the Montgomery bus boycott. It's all good.
But yeah, I didn't want to derail your stream or anything. Or like
No, not at all. My stream is a sequence of endless derailments in general. So,
yeah, I mean, like, so I see what you're saying, kind of with like the guy entering the encampment, but I think that it's kind of problematic if people just get into a university and build like an area and tell people they can't go inside that area. And also, like in the video, it's hard for me to know whether they're really stopping them from the encampment. Because, like, I mean, and you know, you can look at it from my perspective, because you look at that video and it doesn't seem like there's an encampment behind those people.
Yeah, they framed it in a way specifically so that it would invoke that response from people that are unfamiliar.
So you think that, like, basically they filmed it from a direction where there aren't.
It's not that I think. I know. I was there.
Oh, no, when did you go there?
I went there 3 days ago, I think, and he was there actually even that day as well. He's been there every single day. So he's one of these broccoli-haired Zoomers that runs around and is like trying to use American foreign policy and active conflict to basically make TikTok clout for himself. He's also worked with groups like Stand With Us, which is a group that directly gets funding.
Wait, how is Hasan talking shit on that? That's what you do, bro. That's your job. That's you.
From the Israeli government. So, like, he has worked with the Israeli government to do propaganda already. But I'm sure this is a great career opportunity for him. That's why he's been on Fox News. There's videos of him, like, trying to debate and agitate teachers that are near the encampment. Even Sky News called him a counter-protester and an agitator. Like, he's like a known figure. This is not a random guy. That's also the reason why he is...
Well, not broccoli head, not Israeli. But the rest of it, using American foreign policy and wars to create TikTok clout capital for himself. That's Hasan. No? Why is he talking shit on that?
At least for UCLA campus, he's the only video of, like, anyone even claiming the students are blocking people from going to campus. Because he's deliberately going up to the encampment in an effort to try to get into the encampment to start fights. When I was there, a bunch of Zionist counter-protesters tried to do that as well. And the students were incredibly well organized, and they just set up a human chain to, like, they don't even, like, physically apprehend or remove people. They basically just body block them as though they're you know, having a picnic.
Oh yeah, no, I saw that, and I think it was like 2 nights ago, not last night, whenever all this stuff got removed, but the night before. I mean, it was pretty obvious that, like, the Israeli or, like, Zionist or anti-Palestinian ones were the aggressors, and I think that that's a bad thing. I mean, I don't think that the guy is in the wrong, though, for being a counter-protester or even for being an agitator. Really, it depends on how you define the word, because I mean, that's his freedom of speech, and I feel like that's what's fair, in the same way that it's fair for those other people to go and protest for Palestine.
Yeah, but the difference is, first of all, bear mace or mace in general is illegal to bring to protest, and he's, like, flashing it. There's another video of the students, literally, he walks up to them when they're gearing up for the cops to show up.
Yeah.
And the students say, we're peacefully protesting against the Israeli genocide here. Like, we see your bear mace. Like, please, you're making us feel unsafe. And he actually literally does not have a right to have that on him. And yet, that on that very same night, last night, he was over there dabbing it up with the cops and shit. The cops obviously don't give a shit about the pro-Palestinian encampment, especially because 2 nights prior, at this point, when the counter-protesters actually tried to enter the encampment.
Why do they give a shit about the encampment? What?
They came with weapons, they came with fireworks, they came with skunk spray, they came with bear mace.
That was like the day that, because they were chanting the "Where were you?" Was this the "Where were you" moment?
I don't know what do you mean, where were you?
Well, okay, I need to see. Okay. Yeah, I don't know what happened. I don't know what this is about. Has someone got an article, but what's this about? I need to know. Because Hasan could just be fucking lying here, or just talking about shit off Twitter. Counter-protesters, weapons, UCLA, Times article. The New York Times used videos filmed by journalists, witnesses, and protesters to analyze hours of clashes and a delayed police response at a pro-Palestinian encampment on Tuesday. Tuesday night, violence erupted at an encampment that pro-Palestinian protesters had set up on April 25th. Clashes began after counter-protesters tried to dismantle the encampment's barricade. Pro-Palestinian protesters rushed to rebuild it and violence ensued. Police arrived hours later, but they did not intervene immediately. Well, yeah, but I don't care about just the footage of the fighting, because you can spin any fucking narrative of, oh, well, this side were doing that, and all this shit from a bunch of videos on Twitter, but I'd rather read a journalist who's sat down with a team to analyze all the footage and figure out what's actually happening. A New York Times examination of more than 100 videos from clashes at the University of California, Los Angeles, found that their violence ebbed and flowed for nearly 5 hours, mostly with little or no police intervention. The violence has been instigated by dozens of people who are seen in videos counter-protesting the encampment. The video showed counter-protesters attacking students in the pro-Palestinian encampment for several hours. Have they been identified as students? Okay. Including beating them with sticks, using chemical sprays, launching fireworks as weapons. As of Friday, no arrests were made in connection with the attack. To build a timeline of the events that night, the Times analysed 2 live streams along with social media videos captured by journalists and witnesses. The melee began when a group of counter-protesters started tearing away metal barriers that had been in place to cordon off pro-Palestinian protesters. Hours earlier, UCLA officials had declared the encampment illegal. Security personnel hired by the university are seen in yellow vests standing to the side throughout the incident. University spokespersons declined to comment on the security staff's response. So, I mean, what this is immediately feeling like is that basically, because the political tensions are so fucking high, everyone who's in charge and should have been stepping in to deal with this situation didn't want to for fear of upsetting one side or the other. And basically just let the situation deteriorate and let mobs act like mobs and fuck each other up. Great. Thanks, police. Oh, man. It's not clear how the counter-protest was organized or what allegiances. Yeah, there needs to just be, like... Fuck. I don't know how... It's so difficult, man. Because it is just so difficult to get an authority to like that to act cold and impartially, detached, when there's a bunch of interests at play and a bunch of shit could go wrong. It's not clear how the counter-protest was organised or what allegiances people committing the violence had. The video showed many of the counter-protesters were wearing pro-Israel slogans on their clothing. Some counter-protesters blared music, including Israel's national anthem, a Hebrew children's song, and Habu Tabu, an Israeli song about the Israeli Resistance campaign in Gaza. Based. As counter-protesters tossed away metal barricades, one of them was seen trying to strike a person near the encampment. Another threw a piece of wood into it. Some of the first signs of violence. Attacks on the encampment continued for nearly 3 hours before police arrived. Counter-protesters shot fireworks towards the encampment at least 6 times, according to videos analysed by the Times. One of them went off inside, causing protesters to scream. Jesus. Okay, this is bad. Everyone exploded at the edge of the encampment. Another exploded at the edge of the encampment. One was thrown in direction a group of protesters who were carrying an injured person out of the encampment. Is that a J-Dam? I think it's a J-Dam. Yeah, these seem like these are probably like I'm based on what I'm seeing here, this is going to be like hardcore, like Zionist counter protesters, isn't it? Like, because that's like full blown like Israeli nationalism. This is essentially like, it's sort of similar to, like, say you've got like Chaz, but then the Proud Boys show up. It's like, okay, well, I don't like Chaz, but then if the Proud Boys are gonna go in there and just start beating the shit out of people, like, okay, well, I don't like that either. Some counter protesters sprayed chemicals both into the encampment and directly people's faces. What do you mean so little attention on these psychos? This article was put out 2 hours ago, Deep. Deep, this article's been out for 2 hours. It's the fucking New York Times, and the article's been out for 2 hours. When did the attacks happen? I assume over the last 3 days, right? That's what I've been hearing about going on. It must have been what? I would guess Wednesday night. And it's taken a few days to go over all of the material and determine what exactly happened and why it happened. I don't understand what you're crying about, Deep. Again, it's just another one of your useless... Isn't this weird? Oh, actually, it wasn't weird. It wasn't weird at all. It's desperate. It's pathetic. Come with something better. You're gonna try and make a point. It's not on my custom tailored Twitter feed that is algorithmically targeted to show me things that I'm gonna get engaged in. Oh, okay. Sorry, Deep. I'm sorry that's happened to you. It's actually on the New York Times front page right now. Two hours ago, they just released a whole piece about it, saying how bad the counter-protesters are. In one video, protesters shouting inside the encampment can be heard yelling, "Do not engage, hold the line." In some instances, protesters in the encampment are seen fighting back, using chemical spray on counter-protesters, trying to tear down barricades or swiping them with sticks. Okay, so it wasn't just one side with chemical spray. Okay. Thanks, Hasan. That's okay. That's cool. Except for a brief attempt to capture a loudspeaker used by counter-protesters and water bottles being tossed out of the encampment. None of the videos analysed by the Times show any clear instance of encampment protesters initiating confrontation. None of the videos analysed show any clear instance of encampment protesters initiating confrontations with counter-protesters beyond defending the barricades. So they did initiate confrontations, but it was over defense of the barricade. But there were no other records of them initiating confrontations. Okay. Shortly before 1 a.m., more than 2 hours after the violence erupted, a spokesperson with the mayor's office posted a statement that said UCLA officials had called the Los Angeles Police Department for help, and they were responding immediately. Officers from a separate law enforcement agency, the California Highway Patrol, began assembling nearby about 1:45 a.m. Riot police with the LAPD joined them. A few minutes later, counter-protesters applauded their arrival, chanting "USA, USA, USA!" Yeah. That's epic. Just 4 minutes after the officers arrived, counter-protesters attacked a man standing dozens of feet from the officers. What? They just did nothing. Jesus. 20 minutes after police arrived, a video shows a counter-protester spraying a chemical towards the encampment during a scuffle over a metal barricade. Another counter-protester can be seen punching someone in the head near the encampment after swinging a plank at the barricade. 15 minutes later, while those in the encampment chanted Free Palestine, Free Palestine, counter-protesters organised a rush toward the barricade. During the rush, a counter-protester pulls away a metal barricade from a woman yelling, "You stand no chance, old lady." The future is now, old man. That's bad. Obviously, assaulting old women is bad. But they shouldn't put stuff like that in here. They shouldn't put stuff like that in here. That's bad. You shouldn't represent them like they're saying stuff like that. That makes them sound cool. Throughout the intermittent violence, officers would capture on video standing around about 300 feet from the area for roughly an hour without stepping in. Jesus. It was not until 2:42 a.m. that officers began to move toward the encampment, after which counter protesters dispersed. I mean, that's what I would bet. Yeah, but I would want to know why. I would want to know why. Like, what were the orders at this point and why? Because I don't know how they deal with it. It may be the case that when there's an encampment, there's certain shit that's got to get signed off and fucking like stuff has to be set up before they actually make a move. I don't know if that's the case. So I would want to know like what actually the reason for it is. I mean, it seems shit. It does seem like they're fucking up. Like, someone's fucked up, but I don't know who. Anyway. Throughout the intermittent violence, officers were captured on video sent at 300 feet waves on 2:42 a.m. And the night's violence between the two camps mostly subsided. So it just ended on its own. Okay. That's epic. Yo, they signed a peace deal. Yo, ceasefire? Yo. Yo. Oh, man. The LAPD and California Highway Patrol did not answer questions from the Times about their responses on Tuesday night, deferring to UCLA. While declining to answer specific questions, the university spokesperson provided a statement to the Times from Mario Sacco, UCLA's Vice Chancellor of Strategic Communications. We're carefully examining our security processes from that night. We're grateful to UC President Michael Drake for also calling for an investigation. So is it like a police issue, or was it this sounds like this feels like they say the university might know it's their issue. That's how that comes off to me, doesn't it? UCLA's Vice Chancellor of Strategic Communications. We're carefully examining our security processes from that night. Grateful for also calling for investigation. So it sounds like there was possibly an issue in the university's process with dealing with this stuff. LAPD officers were seen putting on protective gear and walking toward the barricade around 2:50 a.m. They stood in between the encampment and the counter-protest group. Counter-protesters began dispersing. While police continued to stand outside the encampment, the video was filmed at 3:32 a.m. shows a man who was walking away from the scene being attacked by a counter-protester, then dragged and pummeled by others. An editor at the UCLA student newspaper, the Daily Bruin, told the Times the man was a journalist at the paper. They were walking with other student journalists who had been covering the violence. The editor said she had also been punched in the eyes with a chemical, sprayed in the eyes with a chemical. On Wednesday, UCLA's Chancellor, Gene Block, issued a statement calling the actions by instigators who attacked the encampment unacceptable. Yeah, obviously. They just like being straight up violent. Like, a spokesperson for California government, Gavin Newsom, criticized campus law enforcement's delayed response, said it demands answers. Los Angeles Jewish and Muslim organizations also condemned the attacks. Sam Alush, director of Great Los Angeles Area Office on Council, is like, fuck me, Jesus Christ, that's a mouthful. American Muslim Relations Department called on the California Attorney General to investigate the lack of police response. The Jewish Federation blamed UCLA officials for creating an unsafe environment over months. Said the officials have been systemically slow to respond when law enforcement is desperately needed. I mean, that's probably the case, right? I understand, obviously, they're going to not mention the fact that there were violent protesters, which is the case here, in this instance. Or violent counter-protesters, I should say. But it does not shock me to hear the suggestion that universities have been slow to act against perhaps excessive pro-Palestine protests due to a political pressure, due to a social pressure. 15 people reportedly injured in the attack, according to the letter sent by the President University of California system to the Board of Regents. After the attack began, law enforcement warned pro-Palestinian demonstrators to leave the encampment or be arrested. By early Thursday morning, police dismantled the encampment and arrested more than 200 people from the encampment. Based. I can't take this article seriously. It reeks of PR. Then go listen to TikTok or something, dude. I don't know. You sound like a retard from everything you said in the chat, so I'm not surprised that you struggle with actual articles.
Oh, yeah. I guess you were sleeping. Like last night, whenever it happened, like a lot of the protesters were like chanting at the cops.
Oh,
and
yeah.
They were saying, like, "Where were you?" Yeah. Okay. So like we're talking about the same thing, right?
So the night prior, the reason why they were chanting "Where were you?" last night to the cops is probably because the night prior, Zionist counter protesters actually stormed the camp and beat the shit out of some of the Palestinian students, or pro-Palestinian students, with like wood pallets.
I watched it happen. I watched it happen live. It was disgusting. Like I was kind of disappointed that the police didn't arrest any of them.
Yeah, the police came. The police actually came.
They did.
Yeah, and they stood by for an hour and 30 minutes in single file line formation while these guys were beating the shit out of. And these guys aren't even students. Like you can see it in the video. They're like, these guys are like adults.
Again, but Hasan is now going to blame the police. He's going to he's going to be like, these officers. It's funny because it's like he switches from systemic to individual analyses, just depending on whether he likes the people or not. It's crazy. Because this is an issue with process. They have to follow the orders. They can't just go out acting randomly and jumping into a tense situation between two large groups of potentially, people who could be armed, people who have like mace, shit like that. They can't just go jumping in there and stopping individual fights. So it's an issue with process, clearly. That there was a process that fucked up. But he will just immediately use it to just go, the police were just standing there. The police were just standing. It's not about the police just standing there. It's about the process that was in place to get the police to step in. But he's acting like it's just, the police are just there. They're just like pro-Israel. The police are just pro-Israel. They're all pro-Israel, and they just want to hurt the Palestinian protesters and help the Zionist counter-protesters destroy it all. They're just pro-Israel. And it's like, no, that's not what's happening, is it?
They're older. You know what I mean? They're like older than
there's also the protesters that are Palestinians that were identified as being older as well.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it's hard to
I'm saying.
Yeah.
No, I'm saying that like a lot of these guys, especially the more violent ones, have already been like identified as not going to UCLA, and they're basically return customers. So. And they're basically return customers at this point. It was a big point of contention with the students too, because UCLA was like, "Oh, we are going to take administrative action against the counter protesters for being violent," and the students were frustrated with that because they were like, "How are you going to do anything as an administration to someone who's not a student?" Because a lot of the counter protesters were not students. Like there were known right-wing figures and stuff like that amongst the counter protesters. Anyway, so the reason why the students were frustrated, understandably, is because they've demonstrated great messaging discipline so far. They are very, they're as limited in their disruption as possible. And historically speaking, campus-wide protests such as this one is infinitely more disruptive than what the pro-Palestinian encampment looked like. I mean, we're talking in 1968, they were taking, literally, students would go in during the civil rights movement with guns and take deans hostage. In 1968 in Colombia, they took a dean hostage for like days.
Yeah, I know about that.
Yeah, they would literally just like shut off access for a dean from like leaving their room. They'd be like, "No, you're not leaving." So historically speaking, people on the right side of history that we understand we're on the right side of history have taken way more radical and way more disruptive approaches to protest. So all things considered, both in the Columbia University, where they overtook Hamilton Hall again, just like they had done time and time again at Columbia specifically. That hall has a historical significance for student protesters, and also especially at UCLA, where the encampment was like not even remotely disruptive, simply just
I hate that. Okay, the right side of history shit is stupid, because all right side of history means is that looking back, they were probably arguing for the right thing. That doesn't mean that every action taken was justified or even necessary, or even influential. It's just like you can say, "Oh, there was riots as part of this movement." So okay, but did the riots help get anything passed? Did the riots change anything, or did the riots just cause damage and hurt people. You have to show that part too. You can't just show the. You can't just say, "Well, they were right and they rioted."
Taking on this massive lawn space where there's a lot of demonstrations usually, and building a like just putting tents around it and trying to protect the tents from people coming in and it up. There are videos of counter protesters breaking into the encampment in spite of the human wall, the human shield, the human chain that they create. And as soon as they get in, they start throwing hooks, throwing bows, stealing people's tents, trying to break the tents apart and stuff. So that's the reason why they don't want to let in random people to protect the students, because they know the university won't do that. As demonstrated by the fact that they didn't do that when the counter protesters came and the cops literally stood idly by.
I do think that like whenever I watched it live, there was like crazy violence, and then once the cops showed up, even whenever they were in that line, the violence went down by like 95%. But I think that you're totally right that the counter protesters were like the agitators. They 100% were, and they were being violent. And to me, it was disappointing that I think the police didn't arrest more of them, because it was pretty obvious that the pro-Palestinian ones were the ones that were the victims in that situation.
Yeah, but
I mean, to be fair, the New York Times article wasn't actually very clear about that, really, was it? Because, yeah, it shows some cases of people being assaulted in front of police, but it could literally be that the moment they showed up, the violence started dying down just because of police presence, because police were visible and close. And so the order was to, like, you know, just basically stay there, don't start going in and fucking tearing people apart and causing potentially more unrest. Just stand there and sort of try and disperse it like that. Let's see if it disperses with just the presence, just police presence. It could literally be that was... But obviously I don't know. And no one knows, doesn't it? The New York Times don't know, so... Hasan definitely doesn't know. So whatever Hasan's going to say about this is probably retarded.
They ended up arresting only the Palestinian, like the pro-Palestinian side. And the night prior, they didn't actually engage with the counter protesters until they were setting off fireworks and launching them directly in the encampment. So the question is, why are they picking a side? Because they've arrested hundreds of students, both at Columbia University, both in CCNY. What's up?
Well, they've arrested. There's a lot less counter protesters. Of course, they're going to arrest more protesters when it sounds like there weren't actually. It was like a small group of violent counter protesters that came specifically to try and fuck this up. It's not like there are battalions of Israeli Zionist counter protesters at every single university. Like there's a fucking encampment. It's like.
You mean why are the police picking a side?
The police are picking.
What is the engagement?
And it's
here?
not the side that is the violent side in the situation. It's the side that's peacefully demonstrating. In my opinion, a direct violation of First Amendment rights. I don't even personally believe that protesters are supposed to, protesters are going to be disruptive.
Wait, how is this a violation of First Amendment's rights? Okay, where's the violation of First Amendment's rights? Someone said, were they being arrested just for protesting? Is there cases of that where they've been arrested for just protesting? Because the encampment was declared illegal. They're not being arrested for protesting. They're being arrested because they're illegally occupying an area.
Some of those protest movements you might not agree with, or the taxes you might not agree with, but ultimately the way I look at it is they were the perfect victims in this situation, even though I don't expect them to be perfect victims, and yet even after all of that, they were still met with violent free speech suppression from the state.
They were perfect victims. What? They were fucking squat. Okay.
I don't know if it's really free speech suppression, right? Because they're not really getting arrested for protesting. They're getting arrested for putting a bunch of tents on the campus whenever the campus tells them to leave.
Yeah,
I mean,
nobody ever gets arrested for protesting. That's just that's not a thing. Everybody always when states like in Russia or in China or whatever, when people are like getting arrested for protesting, the state of course makes up like another reason for it there as well. They'll be like, oh, trespassing. You know what I mean? Obstructing.
What do you think that's unreasonable?
Do I think that arresting someone for protesting peacefully is unreasonable? Yes.
Well, do I think that? I mean, I think a better question is that if you own a,
they're not being arrested for protesting. They're being arrested because they're preventing people from using the campus. They're preventing people from accessing facilities. They are occupying. You're not on a march. You are setting up essentially an autonomous zone. That is, they were trying to Chaz. They were trying to set up their own little refugee camp. That's what I don't. Yeah, that's gonna get cleared, bro. Sorry, gypsies don't get to do it either.
property, Like, should you have the autonomy to decide who's on that property?
Well, in this circumstance, it's literally public property because it's UCLA. UCLA is a public school too, so that
it's public interest. Get rid of
that ultimately changes the dynamic a lot. It depends on what the property is, though. There's like private property, like someone's house, right? I don't think that people should come to your house and protest it at your house. Like is very different, like disrupting your life, and violating your privacy and safety, versus protesting in the middle of a public space at the school that you pay tuition to is perfectly valid in my opinion.
Well, everybody else pays tuition too. I think it's kind of unfair if, for example, some people that pay tuition are locking other people out that are also paying tuition from the same services that they're both paying for.
So you bring up a good point, right? Like you're saying, this person also pays tuition. He should be able to go to any space he wants to, any place he wants to on campus, which is correct.
I mean, like, I'm sure there's a few exceptions, but yeah, generally.
Yeah. So obviously there are many exceptions, not just a few. Like, UCLA campus is very famous. They shut off certain parts of the campus for film.
Yeah, but the point is that the other students don't have the authority to dictate to you where you can and can't go.
And stuff like that all the time. The difference here is that this is a broad, open public space that these students were already occupying. And the reason why they're not letting, like, they weren't disrupting class. They weren't stopping people from going to class. The university, as a matter of fact, is the reason why the other buildings that were in the surrounding area were shut down. I talked to the students when I was there, and they stated they wanted to go to the library, for example. It's across the green area is across the way from the library. They shut down the library during midterms so that these guys' lives would be harder, so that they would have a harder time studying. They shut down the Wi-Fi so that students that are on the encampment would not be able to use it. Try to make this protest as hard for them as possible, which is normal. I don't think that that's a good thing to do personally. I think it probably goes against the value.
So you should just let, like, because they're not just going in there to study, are they? They're using all the facilities, those things. So there's going to be fucking, like, endless people. There's a whole bunch of people camped right next to, like, the fucking, right next to, like, the library toilets and all this shit. What do you think's happening here? What do you think's going on for the people that are trying to use these facilities normally? They're being fucking... Their entire ability to use these places is being ruined because there's a massive congregation of people right next to them that are insisting on using them too. Many of which probably aren't even students. It was right. Yeah, it's right during midterms. Why are you spending your time protesting during midterms? You're not Palestinian. Why do you care? Go do your fucking homework.
Views that UCLA espouses, specifically ironic because like a lot of these campuses literally have like super woke terminology in their studies. Like USC literally doesn't have genocide studies. They call it resistance to genocide studies. So for me, it's like, if you're taking that extra initiative to be extra woke on the aesthetic front, you should probably not be surprised when your students learn the actual lessons that you're teaching in these classes, which is that you should resist the genocide, right? So the fact that the university turns around after teaching them about many different genocides that have happened all around the world, and then tries to do everything.
You know what? I agree. We should drop those classes.
In their power to make it as like annoying for these students as possible is a little hypocritical in my opinion.
It is hypocritical, but it's also something that's driven by the protesters' actions. And the protesters are doing that, and the result of them doing that is the university shutting down those places. And also the university, and you can correct me if I'm wrong about this because I'm not really sure exactly. This is just what I've heard. I thought that about 2 days ago, the UCLA said that the protest was unlawful, but before then they were basically kind of like not addressing it or not calling in the police to do anything. Is that right?
No, they actually did call the police, but they called the campus police specifically to protect the encampment. I was actually kind of surprised at the university's actions at that time because they knew that there were a lot of counter protesters that, in comparison to Columbia, for example, which had literally called the police against the encampment in Columbia University.
Yeah, I saw that.
The UCLA campus actually had sent police to line up around with their backs to the encampment. And that's not just symbolism. That actually means something, right? When you send cops, like cops.
I mean, if the university is allowing it, then really that's the end result. I mean, they're the ones that make that decision. It seems confusing to me that, based off of the logic that like they're trying to shut down the the library or the Wi-Fi, but they're also like having police come in and protect them. It seems very confusing. Like, what are their goals here? What are they trying to do?
Well, ultimately, their goal is to get the students to shut up and go away and stop bothering the administration to make these moves about divestment. I don't know if you're familiar with the goals of the student protests were, and every campus is different, but like specifically the UCLA one I can speak to.
Is the divest, yeah.
Yeah, it's to divest from UCLA. The UC system across the board is a massive endowment, and that endowment basically works like a mutual fund, and they're investing in a lot of corporations, and the students want to have financial transparency in what corporations the university endowments are going to, like what corporations they're investing in, which is perfectly valid, perfectly reasonable demands to make. As a matter of fact, a lot of companies have done this. A lot of people have done this successfully, demanding that people divest from oil and gas companies for like environmental activism. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, it's been going on a lot. And just for the record, like I totally support them protesting against that. Even if I agree or disagree with it, it's their right to protest against that. The only concern that I have is whenever it shuts down other students' ability to learn or get an education, or for people to use the facilities in the way that.
So what? Does this all fundamentally come down to the same boycott shit that fucking loser came up running at Hasan about? Is that what this is all about? Is it because they think that this money's going to Israeli products and exports? Okay, Jesus Christ. I hope these universities crush these people, man. Kick them all out. Fuck it.
They're intended to.
Go back to your rich fucking parents. Go back to your rich fucking parents. Go back to your fucking shitty mansion. I hope your life's ruined for this. Seriously. All of them.
Yeah.
Whenever you talk about the actual like intent of the protesters, I totally support them.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Or even the counter protesters, because that's freedom of speech. I think that, you know, if you don't have that, I mean, you don't have anything.
Yeah, as long as they're not, long as they're not trying to like directly agitate, disrupt, and like harm the students, because there's also a completely separate dynamic here. You hate doxing, right? Like I assume, of course.
We all do.
So would it shock you if I were to tell you that there are active organizations that collaborate sometimes with the Israeli government, sometimes independently, that are tasked with doxing students deliberately, and even putting their faces on trucks around the campus and driving those trucks around the campus with their massive billboards, basically saying like this student, their name, and be like, this is an anti-Semite.
Oh yeah, I mean, I would instantly believe that. I mean, absolutely, and I'm sure that there are people on the other side to do the same thing. It's just
there aren't any official organizations in the same way that Canary Mission, in the same way that like the organization.
I don't even, well, yeah, maybe not for that specifically. There's plenty of official organizations that are doing crazy shit that's pro Hamas and Palestine, though. That's, sorry, listen. Antifa, well, yeah, I mean, that's whole Vivian Wolf's kind of thing, isn't it? But that's not, they wouldn't call, Hasan wouldn't accept that as an official organization, would he? I saw one of them lost a big legal job and they apologized. It's this New York firm, so they wouldn't take any of the people protesting.
I'm referencing is called Canary Mission. There's a couple other official organizations as well. Some of them are American organizations. They literally directly will be like, oh, are you at a pro-Palestinian protest? You're a anti-Semite. And then they plaster their faces. They literally try to stop.
Well, you got that like a week ago, right? Or 2 weeks ago?
StopAntisemitism.org called me an anti-Semite of the week.
Yeah,
but I mean, that's
problem.
What's up?
Well, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And this is kind of the problem that I have. And I think that really, to me, it's pretty obvious that, you know, being against Israel doesn't mean that you hate Jews.
It's just, I can find no, I don't think Hasan is like a genuine anti-Semite, but I can find absolutely no sympathy for him when he is just so quick to immediately mischaracterize and slander people as bigots and right-wingers and fascists, and I've got absolutely zero sympathy. Good. I don't care what you are. They call you a pedophile. I wouldn't care, bro. I don't care. I don't care.
Right.
Of course. And there are plenty of Jews who are against Israel as well, especially at those protests.
Well, there's even some that are protesting in Israel, as far as I know.
Like, you can't spend years doing this exact shit to so many people and then bitch and whine when it happens to you. Like, nah. It's like if Keffel's got banned. It's like, yeah, suck it up. Don't care. Or Cloudflare dropped Keffel. It's like, okay, fuck you.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, I understand that. And I think that's problematic too. I don't agree with that either. In my opinion, I think it's intimidation. But it's also like a misrepresentation. So yeah, I think that's bad in the same way that anybody else. I also don't think that people who are pushing back against these people, like the actual protesters that are making encampments and everything like that, I don't think that they're fascists. Like I have people calling me a fascist, for example, which I think is really kind of overboard. And I think also,
yeah, don't you think that's kind of overboard, Hasan? And people online just start calling other people fascists for no don't you think, Hasan? Asmongold kind of cooking a little bit here, I feel.
I think that's problematic too. I don't agree with that either. In my opinion, I think it's intimidation. But it's also like a misrepresentation. So yeah, I think that's bad in the same way that anybody else. I also don't think that people who are pushing back against these people, like the actual protesters that are making encampments and everything like that, I don't think that they're fascists. Like I have people calling me a fascist, for example, which I think is really kind of overboard. And I think also,
I think some of those guys are fascists, for the record. I do.
And I bet some of the people that are against Israel are anti-Semites. Absolutely.
Yeah, but ultimately, no, I don't disagree with you. I think there's like definitely anti-Semitism in the pro-Palestinian movement as well. But the broader, you have to look at the broadest defense of the movement, right? Like, what does the movement signify? What their overarching goals are? The reason why I have an easier time calling those who defend Israel fascist is because Zionism is predicated on the idea that Israel has to be a Jewish supremacist ethno-state that literally has a certain percentage of Jews inside of Israel. This is a demographic concern unlike any other. Here in the United States of America, if we were to say America has to be a nation that is 75%, Irish, English, and German, white, everyone would understandably go, that's insane. That's just white supremacy. But Zionism is that exact same principle, is that exact same concept, but for for very valid
Yeah, he's describing Zionism now, but that's not everyone that is pro-Israel.
historical reasons, it has been able to shelter itself as a defensive posture, as though it is a defensive ethno-state. The valid reasons,
like plenty of people want to move to like a one state. Or well, would have. It's sort of fallen by the wayside now, I feel like, since the last few months. But there were plenty of people who would have advocated for eventually moving towards one state where everyone lives happily, right? That was what many people would have said they wanted, really. So I don't believe in that everyone who's pro-Israel is pro-Zionism.
Holocaust in the context of like World War II and like everything that happened. Yeah, so no, I understand that. And I mean, I'm not really a pro-Israel guy at all, honestly. I don't really give a shit about them. It's not my fight to fight. It's not my problem.
Actually. I mean, listen.
Well, I mean, that's a good point. Yeah, no, I know.
We do spend a shit ton of tax dollars to defend Israel. We gave $26 billion to Israel just this past week.
I mean, yeah, I think it's a waste of money. It's absolutely a waste of money. I wouldn't want to support that.
Yeah,
especially now whenever they're doing things and like bombing these.
This is just like the absolute. He's not even bothering to engage. He clearly hasn't. He's just got the isolationist libertarian line where it's just, well, we're giving money to another country? We're giving money to another country? There's no way this could benefit me. I can't see any way this could possibly benefit me.
Over in Gaza and shit. Like, of course not. Yeah, why would I want to support that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Which is why I think the protest that these students are engaging in is like not only perfectly valid, but I think their methods are above and beyond. Like there are rarely ever going to be protests where like you have a hard time finding a single person that doesn't say something wrong or a single person that doesn't get ahead of themselves.
You're totally right. I mean, you can't color an entire like movement based off of like the most like extremists or like the most bad actors, right? The same as like I'm sure there are anti-Semites that are Palestinian, pro-Palestinian, but that's not the majority of them. There are also people who are trying to co-opt. Like there's always like a bunch of charlatans on Twitter who are actually neo-Nazis like openly, but then they'll be like, oh yeah, how about them Jews? Like they'll try to like sneak in to be like, oh yeah, we love Palestine, right? When in fact you look a couple tweets down and
he's throwing because he's got this stupid libertarian perspective, so he's just folding. A lot of that money goes back into US companies making the arms. It also freezes out a lot of countries getting the money from buying from countries like Russia without getting sanctioned. Well, that sounds reasonable.
My friend. Yeah.
Yeah. So that is actually part of the reason why these student organizers are very careful with who they let into the encampment as well, because they don't want to make sure that they want to make sure that there's no one that is like in support of Palestine or seemingly in support of Palestine that's in there to say like some. And they do a very good job with that too. If someone
Nazi shit, and that's smart for them to do.
Yeah, so that's the other reason why they don't let everyone into the encampment.
Yeah, I mean, I can kind of understand that, but I think that it's also really.
Yeah, you see, the thing is that these Palestine encampments, they're actually the reason why they're blocking people off is so they're making sure that there's no anti-Semites getting in. Yeah, okay, Hasan. All right, man. If you tell whatever you say, bro, I'll wait for the New York Times article on that one. I think
determined based off of the university. Like the truth is that the university should have the final say on whether the encampment like that should exist or not. And I think that really, if the university is okay with it, then of course the encampment should exist because they're the ones that determine what the rules are there. But I think if the university doesn't want the encampment, I don't think that the students have the right to make an encampment there. I think that's so much of it.
I mean, I think that
I don't know how much of this will watch it. If Asmongold's just going to bend over, this is fucking pathetic. This is embarrassing.
Especially like protests will always be disruptive, obviously, but if protests are only determined by how lawful they are, you can write a law to make any protest illegal, which Americans kind of have, as a matter of fact. I don't know if it would shock you to find out if I were to tell you that in your state, in Texas, if you want to work for the Texas state, if you want to work for the city, you have to actually sign a law that says you will never engage in boycotting or demanding divestment or demanding sanctions on the state of Israel. Did you know this? That's a direct violation of First Amendment rights. A direct violation. In Texas, if you want to work for the Texas state, if you want to work for the city, you have to actually sign a law that says you will never engage in boycotting or demanding divestment or demanding sanctions on the state of Israel. Did you know this? That's a direct violation of First Amendment rights. A direct violation.
Okay, well, if that's a direct violation of First Amendment, then it should be challenged, right? Surely that will get challenged. What's this law called? Texas, 1 minute. Texas law barring. Boycotting Israel. Oh, wait. So it has been challenged. Wait, it says that. I just read the fucking headline. Hasan's got bad info. It's actually already... Federal judge ruled that it violates the firm's free speech. So what's the deal here? Let's have a look. April 18th. So when was this? That's January 31st, 2022. Oh, this is old info. Wait. I'm saying now there's this... Paxton wins major case defending Texas's anti-boycott of Israel law. Attorney General Paxton secured a victory in the New Orleans-based U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit while defending a Texas law that prohibits state funds from going to companies that boycott Israel. Yeah, it looks like it's still... It looks like basically this has been ruled like that it's not a violation. That's what it sounds like. Everything I can see online is that it's been ruled by the courts. There wasn't a violation. It said that one, the Paxton one, for Texas, said that it didn't have standing and the plaintiff failed to demonstrate damage to their constitutional rights.
State of Israel. Did you know this? That's a direct violation of First Amendment rights. A direct violation.
How did that even happen?
AIPAC wrote the legislation. This was legislation that actually two Jewish prominent members of Congress were very much against, as a matter of fact. Bernie Sanders and Dianne Feinstein have openly criticized this for obvious First Amendment violation.
Well, you're saying it violates the First Amendment, but it sounds like judges disagree. And unless you can lay out an actual argument for why the judges are wrong about this, I'm probably going to defer to their understanding of decades, hundreds of years of law over yours, Hasan. I'm going to be totally honest.
Boundaries.
Yeah, I've never heard of that before.
Yeah,
like I heard there's like some anti-Semitism bill that's happening today. I haven't read about it yet, but yeah. I didn't know there was something that was going on that was already on the books, man. That's crazy.
Yeah. Well, would it shock you to find out that there's actually 35 other states, many of them red states, as a matter of fact, that claim that they care about First Amendment?
It was never tested for First Amendment violations. But it didn't say that if it said that he failed to demonstrate damages to his rights. The plaintiff. That sounds like, and it hasn't been overturned. Let's have a look. I don't. Oh, man, the thing is, this is fucking why watching this shit is so cringe. Because I actually want to be right. I have to look stuff up. Can I find something that's not from Al Jazeera? Please. Give 1 second.
And no restriction on free speech. Ironic, because Texas Governor Greg Abbott actually said that, in Texas college campuses, even outsiders can come to campus and demonstrate to the best of their ability. It was
2021, I think.
2019.
He wrote a little bit later, or earlier, yeah.
Yeah. He signed legislation into law, which he has personally violated himself by using the government. So free speech.
Are you talking about the recent one?
Yeah. So no matter what happens, like the idea that like every single protest has to go through like a permits process is obviously, I think, a little bit ridiculous, because like it is there, that permit process is there to like genuinely make the state restrict certain kinds of speech and only allow other kinds of speech to exist, which in my opinion is in direct violation of the First Amendment in the way that we understand it. So people make laws all the time.
Oh yeah, of course they do. And yeah, I see what you're saying. Absolutely. And I think that there's probably a middle ground with that, where it's like if people are protesting and there's a tent there, it's okay. Probably not a really big deal. But I still do think that the university, or especially other like private businesses, should have every right to tell people not to be there, because it's also their private property. Like I think somebody's right to protest is really important, but I think it's also important that somebody has a right to have autonomy over their own property, especially whenever if something happens to somebody there, they could get sued for it too. So, and I think that that's really kind of what the problem with like a lot of this is that I think that like you and I probably align with a lot of the different like opinions that we have in terms of like Israel or Zionism or anything like that. I just don't really think that these methods are effective. And I think that they alienate a lot more people than they bring in.
I think if the student protests were not effective, they would not have actually had multiple universities at this point meet their demands, like in Northwestern and in Brown University. And now, as recently as a couple hours ago, Rutgers University has met the demands of Students for Justice for Palestine, which has led to the peaceful dispersal of the encampments. But beyond that, I think that another testament to the success of these protests is the violent reaction of the state. Because in some ways, like police behaving in this way also galvanizes a lot of the protesters. As a matter of fact, like this entire conversation started originally quietly at Vanderbilt University, where a couple of fans of mine, as a matter of fact, got suspended from school for doing an encampment. Then students at Columbia University saw that and said, that's bull. We should divest as well. And then their encampment began after that. And then they got suppressed by the police. And then their encampment grew. And now this is in almost every single state, with the exception of, I think, like 10 at this point, and also happening globally, as a matter of fact. So in a way, they were profoundly successful. So successful that
you know a lot more about this than I do. So I'm kind of curious. So you're talking about like how Brown University and a lot of these other universities, the students have had their demands met. And so
Okay, legal analysis. As of 2020, the question of whether American anti-BDS laws are constitutional has not yet been... In fact, I'll pull this up on screen. Many analysts believe that sooner or later there'll be a legal showdown due to the controversial nature of the laws. The debate about the law's constitutionality focuses on two central issues. Whether boycotts of Israel and boycotts in general can be considered as a form of discrimination on the same level as discrimination based on gender, race, or similar attributes. Whether political boycotts are protected speech. If so, laws designed to stop them could violate First Amendment protected freedom of speech. The answer to the first question has implications to the answer for the latter. If the boycotts of Israel are discriminatory, then the government could be free to enact laws against them. In the following sections, those who claim that anti-BDS laws are constitutional are referred to as proponents, and those that they claim they aren't are referred to as critics. Discrimination argument. Proponents argue that boycotts of Israel are a form of discrimination because they target a particular group, Israelis, with the intent of inflicting economic harm on them. Since there is no legal test for deciding whether a consumer boycott is discriminatory, the discrimination argument is based on laws regulating discrimination in other areas, such as employment, disability, and housing. In particular, two doctrines in labor law have been referred to: disparate treatment, or discriminatory intent, and disparate impact. These laws were not drafted to regulate political boycotts, which limits their applicability, but they have nevertheless been used to analyze whether boycotts of Israel are discriminatory. Okay. Disparate treatment refers to decision-making of persons' membership. Okay, I get that. Opponents argue that BDS leaders' calls for Israel to cease as a Jewish state are anti-Semitic. Critics contend that the allegation is conflating anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. It's probably true. Opposing Israel as a Jewish state is anti-Zionist, but not anti-Semitic, they argue. Critics also point out that the organization that coordinates BDS, the Palestinian BDS National Committee. So, okay, well, the thing is that I'd say this is a conflation of this is retarded to put into law, to say that basically anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. But in the current context, if you are arguing that basically, let's just have a ceasefire and just like have Israel be open borders and have people just wander in, you are basically just saying you want people to die. That is what you're arguing for. But I don't think that should be enshrined in law. That's retarded. Because obviously it may not always be like that. Proponents note that BDS singles out Israel for boycott while ignoring human rights abuses in other parts of the world. They argue that this focus is driven by animosity toward Jews or Israelis, and it is circumstantial evidence of discriminatory intent. I agree with that generally, but again, I don't know. Is this a good legal argument? I don't know. That's a lot to fucking potentially violate First Amendment over. Not much to do so, rather. They refer to the working definition of anti-Semitism, which gives applying double standards by requiring of Israel a behavior not expected or demanded of any other democratic nation as an example of anti-Semitism. Yeah, fair. The claim, which relies on the but-for test, a legal doctrine establishing causality in discrimination cases, is that BDS would not have boycotted Israel if not for its Jewish or Israeli identity. There is a point here, no? I feel like. It's a shit law, well, sure, but is it a First Amendment violation? Does it break the First Amendment? That's what Hasan's arguing. It's saying it's a blatant First Amendment violation. The Saudis are forcefully expelling tribes to build NEOM, and US is doing naught. The J-Boy swag is definitely involved. Yeah, see, exactly, because it's like people only give a fuck about people. It's true. People only give a fuck about the bad shit Israel do and the bad shit America do. That's all people give a fuck about, and it's because they live in America. They don't like Jay. That's just that is it, though. I think because it's not like these people are out there fucking like occupying buildings to stop Saudi oil purchases or some shit, right? Or China. Yeah, it is just... No, I've been gaslit on this. It is just about the Jays. It is. It is. That is what they care about. That's what it's about. It's that and protecting the heckin' underdog brown people. It's those two things. And it's all just that. It's all just that. All the support comes down to. Because they'll just turn a blind eye to crazy shit the Saudis are doing. It's fine because they're Muslim, I guess. Okay, well. What's the free speech argument? Let's see this one. Critics claim that anti-BDS laws are unconstitutional because participation in political boycotts is protected speech, and the government cannot require citizens to relinquish First Amendment rights in exchange for government contracts. To show this, critics refer to the NAACP versus Claiborne Hardware Company, which was about an NAACP-initiated boycott against white merchants in Claiborne. The goal of the boycott was to pressure city officials to meet demands about racial integration. The Supreme Court, in its decision, found that boycotts to bring about political change occupy the highest rung of hierarchy among the First Amendment values. Proponents contend that boycotting is not per se expressive conduct equivalent to speech, therefore not protected speech, and therefore not protected. Okay, all right. It is not per se expressive conduct equivalent to speech, and therefore not protected speech. They view calling for a boycott as distinct from participating in one. Okay. The former would be protected speech, while the latter, which anti-BDS laws address, would not. Some calling for a boycott of Israel would not be affected by anti-BDS laws as long as they themselves did not boycott Israel. To them, Claiborne Hardware is irrelevant because it affirmed the right to call for a boycott, but not to participate in one. Oh, I'm seeing now. Okay. This view was taken by Arkansas Direct Court that ruled on Arkansas LP, because it does seem like, inherently, when you hear this law, you do immediately think, like, yeah, surely that is a First Amendment violation. And then it's like there's precedent for it. It's like, okay, yeah, it's got to be then, surely, right? So even with the discrimination argument, like I agree with this discrimination argument as an argument, not necessarily for this, but I agree with the analysis that's being made there. But this makes sense that this would be contentious. You have the right to pretend not to boycott, but secret. Well, the proponents of this law are arguing that no. You should be able to say you're going to boycott, but you should not be able to actually boycott if you're in a government contract. Okay, I guess here's what I'm kind of struggling to understand. How are government contracts selected? Why can the government not just choose not to work with people who... I don't know. I literally know nothing about this. This is totally... Could they not just choose not to work with people who are boycotting Israel? With those businesses, surely you can literally get... The reason you trade with Israel is because you can get better and cheaper goods, I would imagine. That's why they're so prevalent. Now, and lots of technology as well. Lots of technology. So surely those companies that don't work with Israel would just be performing worse. and you just wouldn't want to work with them. You just wouldn't want to give them contracts. There's an official process. It's public. You submit your application. They choose bidders. Okay. Is there anything else we want here, or do we kind of get the gist now? That's all I really wanted was the gist of the arguments. I now know like 300 times more about this than Hasan, by the way. Just from like 10 minutes of research. Okay, so the view was taken by the Arkansas District Court that ruled on Arkansas Times. Professor Mark Waldrop argued that Rumsfeld's Forum for Academic Institutional Rights was a controlling case in which the Supreme Court ruled that the federal government could withhold funds from universities, refusing to give military recruiters access to school resources. Universities denying access to military recruiters is analogous to boycotting Israel. Proponents argue. Yeah. Okay. Since the Supreme Court ruled that denying access to military recruiters was not expressive conduct, neither could boycotts of Israel be expressive conduct. Critics argue that the analogy does not hold because FAIR was not about boycotting and participation in a political boycott. It is obvious expressive conduct. Anti-BDS laws merely withdraw a privilege from boycotters, that of being eligible for government contracts. This argument runs afoul of the unconstitutional conditions doctrine, critics argue. The doctrine holds that the government may not deny a benefit to a person on a basis that infringes on its constitutionally protected interests, especially its interest in freedom of speech. The doctrine was promulgated in 2 seminal Supreme Court cases. However, these cases involved existing business relations between private entities and the government, where the doctrine of unconstitutional conditions applies to situations where no existing business relationships exist, has not been addressed by the Supreme Court. Okay, yeah, so this is like super in contention. So these are just like, there's a lot of unanswered legal questions here. So for Hasan to sit there and act like this is a blatant First Amendment violation, that's not true. Yeah, but I don't know Jews live in Israel. I don't know that's a good argument for why you can't boycott them. I can't get on board with that. Because that means you can't boycott any ethno state, right? And if people, you would hope that be able to boycott Nazi Germany. Well, it isn't already decided though, is it? Because these are unanswered. There are unanswered legal questions that need to be hashed out in court, and probably likely will be hashed out in court. It doesn't seem like it is already decided. The law is passed. Texas and Florida abide by the laws as they stand. Okay, you're not actually making sense. The law may have been passed, but there are still unanswered legal questions, the answers to which could very easily overturn them. And there is a hot debate about it. It's not as simple as it. Yeah, this is settled. It's clearly not. I can see that very clearly. I didn't disagree with it's still law. Yeah, no one said it wasn't law. You're not arguing with anyone. That's okay.
So whenever you say that, oh, okay. Well, the ones that have, did they ever like have the police remove the encampments? Because like I think if the university is allowing it to happen, then I feel like the protest is totally justified. It's completely fine.
No, there was police presence on all the campuses as well, and the police actually said that they would be interested in violently dispersing the encampments even at Rutgers University. But the administration looked at the demands and found them to be reasonable. See, the thing is, there's 2 ways to always deal with conflict management, no matter what. You either escalate, you either use the violent arm of the state to violently apprehend students, break apart the encampments, use pepper spray, tear gas, and rubber bullets that cops literally shot some of the members of my community in the face with last night. And
I mean, to be fair, whenever I watched, because I watched the whole thing happen, I didn't really see a lot of the police officers shooting people that weren't shooting fire extinguishers at them. Like I'm sorry, but I think if you shoot if you are spraying a fire extinguisher at a police officer, I think
Yeah,
they
but
have
it
every
sounds
right
like there has been an unwillingness from the courts to take on the review of a lot of these laws and to actually answer these questions. Probably because of a mixture of government interests, political pressure.
to shoot you with a rubber bullet. You shouldn't be
Like,
doing that.
I
It's
don't.
disgusting.
Well, I don't know if it would shock you to find out, but rubber bullets are not supposed to be
It's not
directed,
that simple.
directly at protesters. It's supposed to be a less than lethal apprehension method or riot control method. And when they actually do shoot someone in the face, they can kill them.
To the people, like you're not
No,
supposed
they're
to.
supposed to. Yeah, against fire extinguishers. What they're supposed to do is shoot it on the ground. These guys were directly aiming it at the faces of students. And also, it wasn't just students that were holding fire extinguishers. It was pretty much anyone and everyone. It was it was basically a kill zone. You can kill people with rubber bullets, by the way. That's why they call it less than lethal.
I mean, I haven't seen. They're saying, when was this? When did this happen? At UCLA. There was none of that in the New York Times article.
There's two ways to always deal with conflict management, no matter what. You either escalate, you either use the violent arm of the state to violently apprehend students, break apart the encampments, use pepper spray, tear gas, and rubber bullets that cops literally shot some of the members of my community in the face with last night. And
I mean, to be fair, whenever I watched, because I watched the whole thing happen, I didn't really see a lot of the police officers.
Like, there's nothing in that New York Times article about rubber bullets.
They're shooting people that weren't shooting fire extinguishers at them. Like I'm sorry, but I think if you shoot if you are spraying a fire extinguisher at a police officer, I think they have every right to shoot you with a rubber bullet. You shouldn't be doing that. It's disgusting.
Well, I don't know if it would shock you to find out, but rubber bullets are not supposed to be directed directly at protesters. It's supposed to be a less than lethal apprehension method or riot control method. And when they actually do shoot someone in the face, they can kill them.
To the people, like you're not
No,
supposed
they're supposed to. Yeah, against fire extinguishers. What they're supposed to do is shoot it on the ground. These guys were directly aiming it at the faces of students. And also, it wasn't just students that were holding fire extinguishers. It was pretty much anyone and everyone. It was it was basically a kill zone. You can kill people with rubber bullets, by the way. That's why they call it less than lethal.
Yeah, no, you definitely can, but I'm not. That's
why you call it less than lethal. No, that would mean you can't kill people with them, Hasan. You mean less lethal. Thanks.
The police officers, they're wrong for defending themselves against somebody who's blowing a fire extinguisher at them. I think that's ridiculous. I think that they should have every right to defend themselves against that. Like,
do you think the students have a right to defend themselves?
They weren't being attacked.
Wait,
they weren't being shot.
No, the cops were. At that point, the cops were apprehending them. They were arresting them on site.
Yeah, because they were breaking the law, and the university wanted them off the campus, and they have every right to ask them to leave the campus. They didn't do it, and of course the cops would have to remove them.
Like, let me ask you this way: do you think do you find it to be a just and proportionate response to unarmed students? And many of them, almost all of them, are unarmed. And
they may have had rubber bullets, but I don't see that anyone got shot in the face or seriously injured by this stuff, and it wasn't in this big fucking New York Times write-up about the events of the fucking protest. I just don't see that. Like, that sounds crazy to me. They missed that. They did this whole fucking write-up and they missed that. Come on, let me see this fucking article. From the LA Times article, Los Angeles Police Captain Kelly Muniz said LAPD officers did not fire rubber bullets or other less lethal rounds during the clearing of the encampment. So, Tin in chat, you are wrong. You are wrong. You are hearing a JDAM on the live stream. You've heard footage and tried to identify something yourself, and you failed. There were no rubber bullets. You're crying, JDAM. You're crying, JDAM. You're crying, Armor 3.
Fire extinguishers is few. Do you think it's an appropriate response?
Wait, no, it'd be not Armor 3. It'd be the other way around. It is Armor 3. It wasn't
violently
Armor 3.
apprehend and assault students because they're peacefully demonstrating, but the university now has demanded that they disperse.
Well, I think there's two different categories of that. So for the students that are not being violent, because a lot of the students were being violent, they were throwing things at the cops, they were spraying fire extinguishers at them. I'm sorry, but that's not a peaceful protest. If you're spraying a fire extinguisher at a police officer, you're not being peaceful. So if the police officers are violent in return, no, I actually think it's totally fine.
No, well, here's the thing. That's the reason why this is really important, right? Like the reason why, like, I'm glad I went to the encampment. I'm glad that like all this was filmed. It was peaceful until the police came.
See, this is why it sucks, man. Asmongold is cucking out, but it does blow for him because I can sit here and say Hasan's wrong and retarded when I can fucking go and Google like everything he says for fucking 15 minutes and sit there and read a bunch of shit and find out why he's wrong. But it's fucking impossible because you literally can't argue with someone like this on the fly who is just gonna fucking lie to your face
with weapons and with riot gear and started.
Unless you're like really well researched, obviously.
Apprehending with physical force the students. If you look at the visuals from before the police officers actually came onto campus, it was actually quite peaceful. People are dancing, people are singing, people are eating food and chilling overall. it's actually the university that, and this is what many students are saying as well,
Yeah.
both at Columbia University, even students who might not have agreed with the overall cause of the protest, now feel that the university has left them out and compromised their safety personally by bringing outsiders, specifically cops, to come in and violently apprehend students who weren't doing anything, who weren't harming anyone, who were simply demanding in the most.
He says nothing and just agrees with Hasan.
Like,
after this, he talks a bit more on stream. Okay, we might knock this on the head soon then. Okay, we'll watch a bit more of this, but yeah, if it is literally just Asmongold agreeing with Hasan, while Hasan blatantly lies to his face, like, yeah, this just sucks. This just sucks. Asmongold totally folded.
That the university divest from a violent
Ethan Klein called Diorio fat like last week, didn't he? I thought that was
state that they are funding and facilitating.
I get that. I also totally disagree with it. I think the university should have every right to decide who is and isn't on their property. And I think in the instances that you were giving me an example of earlier, like Brown, I think that Brown didn't ask the police to come in and Brown allowed those protests to happen. And I think that's totally fine. But if the university doesn't want those people there, I think that at a certain point, they have every right to have the police come in and remove them. And the truth is that I don't think that the police were overly violent to a lot of those people. I really don't. I think. I
mean, there's a lot of visuals of people like bleeding profusely from the head, either dude getting hit in the head. But that's violence, right? Like that's.
Well, it's just violence because it is like there's no other. So here's an interesting question, right? So like, what would you propose as an alternative to that? Like, how would you solve?
Oh, great.
Yeah,
great question. So my solution to this would be exactly what Brown and all of these other campuses did, which is to allow the protest to continue and also meet the demands to the best of your ability and take an honest negotiation effort with the students. Because ultimately, if you believe personally that these students are in the right, and it seems like you specifically do think that these students are making just demands.
Yeah, they are.
Right.
They have every right to protest. And like, for example, like at UT here, like we had a lot of protests, and it was very disappointing for me to see a lot of people in my chat and just in the community in general that were celebrating whenever the police were coming in and removing them, because these people were not being violent. They weren't breaking the law. They were just protesting. And I completely support that.
Yeah, but until the university decides that they can't, is what you're saying, right, for UCLA.
Yeah,
so
that's my perspective.
So if the UT, University of Texas Austin administration saying like we don't want these protests on campus, leading to a police response would be just then. But because you're
go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Yeah. So I think that it really kind of depends on the situation. In general, I think the answer to that is probably yes. But I'm sure that there are probably some circumstances, especially with people that are just there and not.
It's like all rules about protest disappear in like the absolute worst case scenario. You know, let's say total takeover, fascist government, like fucking robots, drones going through the streets like fucking Half-Life 2. They fucking scan you and shit. Obviously, in some circumstance like that, where you're talking full-blown armed resistance to a government or some shit, yeah, all rules about protest, obviously, in that, like, some crazy situation, you can cut off some crazy situation like that, where it's totally justified to do basically whatever you want. But generally, yeah, protests about, like, fucking foreign policy on the university, it should probably be down to the university's discretion whether they want that shit on campus or not. It's good to have universities be a bastion of sort of free speech and ideas and shit like that. But if they start causing a serious problem, if they start causing a safety concern, it's the university's problem. It's the university's call. They get to say, hey, listen, we need you fuckers off campus now.
Not taking up space and they're just talking and not really like obstructing anyone, not setting up encampments, and they're just there. Yeah, I would think that's really kind of up for them to remove them for that reason. But in the context of what happened at UCLA, I don't think that it was up because it had been going on for multiple days. And, you know, like it doesn't, like, I mean, let's be real, who really gives about the, you know, the pavement and everything, but they are graffitiing everything and they're destroying a lot of things. Like I see windows getting knocked out. I don't
think there were any windows knocked out of UCLA. You might be confusing that with Columbia. And the only windows that were knocked out.
That's what I was saying in multiple places. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so Columbia University, they broke into Hamilton Hall to take it over, which is, again, I will defend that as well. I have defended that. I think that's perfectly valid. Because
I don't know.
Trespassing. It's trespassing, right?
Yeah, well, it's not just trespassing. It's like breaking, like you're breaking the windows to trespass, right? It's one thing like, oh, we just walked in.
Material damage to facilities. Yeah, material damage to facilities is like is an injustice, is what you're saying here in this situation. Which you might have that opinion.
Yeah, it absolutely.
Okay, so then don't you think?
But what about this? So I can't. I keep wanting to joke about. I keep going to 6 as my big number of people to be D, but I realize that has references to the big event like 100 years ago that people don't like you joking about. So I need to like come up with a different one. That 12 Guerrillian children bombed by the Israeli state. That's what Hasan's about to go for. You care about property more than the 12 Guerrillian dead babies in Palestine?
Facilities. Yeah, material damage to facilities is like is an injustice, is what you're saying here in this situation. Which you might have that opinion.
Yeah, it absolutely.
Okay, so then don't you think that the university's reaction by sending
not quite 100 years ago. Sorry, I wasn't perfect with the fucking estimate
and sending in thousands of cops to break every door inside of Hamilton Hall and most of the windows outside of Hamilton Hall caused an infinite more amount of material damage than just simply meeting the students halfway at the bargaining table?
I completely agree with it. And the reason why is because it's their property to damage and they have every right to do that. And the law has to be upheld to a degree.
But doesn't that mean that like the university kind of doesn't give a shit about the material harm in that circumstance? Because if they cared about what happens to the two windows.
Well, it's not about the material harm necessarily. It's about having the autonomy of the material harm and being able to decide what you do with your own material and what you do with your own property and what you don't do with it. And I think that's extremely important. And it's worth more, and it's more important than any actual material or piece of property in itself. It's the essence that somebody has their own autonomy to decide what they do with what they own.
Because one of the things that they also did at Columbia was falsely claim that like these students were actually harming and being anti-Semitic and like scaring Jewish students, even though ironically Jewish students were overrepresented in those arrested in the first sweep. So once again, it's the university that is claiming that police action must be met, like police action must occur upon these students because they have made up a fake reason, a bullshit reason really, that these students are somehow scaring the student population and threatening them when no such evidence existed for that, only to cause far greater harm to the student population because then they violently assaulted and arrested hundreds of students. So it's like it's a bit of a I'm cutting my nose to spite my face situation, don't you think?
But it's their face to cut, and it's their decision.
Not really, because it is the students.
It really is because it's their right, it's their business, or not business, I guess you could say, but it's their university.
No, universities are business for sure.
Yeah, no, I think that in some cases you're probably right, and I think also like a lot of the people that were being violently arrested, I think it takes.
Asmongold standing his ground here.
YHWH told me to give you this.
Thank you, 1337 anonymous. Praise Yahweh. Praise Yahweh.
Tango in a lot of cases, and I think a lot of these people are being violently arrested, but they're also not complying with what the police are wanting. They're actively breaking the law, and I don't think that's something like how do you like?
So you bring up a really good point.
Like, well, like let me like how do you deal with a person that is actively resisting you and won't obey the law? Because I feel like you have to restrain them somehow, don't you?
So you actually bring up a really good point that I love this conversation. This is not a gotcha at all. Have you ever been arrested?
No, I have not.
Okay, so I have.
I've been pulled over. I've been like detained, but I've never been arrested. Yeah,
so I have. And it's not. I promise you, it's not a gotcha at all. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because resisting arrest is what is always like a tack-on charge. Because cops oftentimes, I'm sure you've seen like body camera footage. Well, they'll be like, "Oh, stop resisting," while they literally have like their knee on the neck of a suspect already. You know what I mean? That's on the ground, and it's technically a bullshit charge. And here's why: because getting handcuffed physically, like physical restriction, physical apprehension, is actually done in such a way that your body cannot contort in that way. So your body naturally reacts when your arms are behind your back and you're being placed in handcuffs. So it's actually one of those laws that is basically designed because it's the physical natural response to you being apprehended. So many times, in many instances, like it's basically there so that it gives cops just cause to say, well, we're using force because you're forcibly resisting. When in fact, many people who are being arrested in a lot of circumstances are not physically, like directly, violently trying to resist.
Dude, this is such a dumb talking point. This is so retarded. Yeah, but sorry, resisting arrest laws are bullshit now. Okay, dude. All right, buddy. This guy, literally, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it, but it is just so fucking privileged, isn't it? Just clearly someone that has never had to be in any situation where there's been, like, someone who might be violent, that they might be at risk to. Thank you.
The way that you and I would understand it, like, you know, punching a cop or you know what I mean? Like, or like not complying. But in many circumstances, they actually are simply trying to comply. In many body camera footage, we see that too, where they're like, I'm not resisting. And they just keep saying, stop resisting. It's because your body is physically moving in that way naturally. It's designed in a way to just add on to the charges to justify after the fact. Once you have decided to apprehend someone physically.
And you're saying this is what's happening whenever you get handcuffed?
Yeah, 100%. And another charge that they're using in UCLA.
Resisting though, right? Because like, you know, I think that there are a lot of instances where somebody is resisting arrest and it's not because of a body contortion reason. They're running away from police or trying to push them away. I mean, you can't have that. I mean,
Yeah, sorry, I was saying, yeah, it's clear that Hasan just never had to be in any sort of situation where he's at any kind of risk. So obvious. So blatant. He knows he never will be. He knows he can sit comfortably. He doesn't care if someone tries to run away from the police. He doesn't care. He doesn't care if someone assaults police. He doesn't need them. He's got private security. It's gated community, right? He doesn't need police. Why would he need police?
I'll grant you the handcuff thing, sure. I mean, I think that there are a lot of cases where like cops are unnecessarily violent and they escalate the situation in a way that they shouldn't. And
Yeah.
I think
The
that's
Bill
bad,
Clinton
absolutely.
kid nearly
I'll
murdered
give
him.
you another perspective that's also even crazier than that. Are you ready?
That was correct. Yeah, when Matan.
Did you see the Matan versus Hasan
Asmongold.
stuff?
What's going on? How you guys doing? We love landlords. We're all against unions. We're here to protest against the landlords and the unions. We love them. Can we do like a quick shake on the hand? We love landlords. Look. We love landlords. We love landlords. We love them a lot. We're all against unions. They're not fair to the corporate companies. This is a crazy protest. Landlords, landlords, landlords. We love landlords. We love them. We love landlords.
Move away a little bit?
No, he said we love landlords. What's going on? How you guys doing? We love landlords.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like, of course, Hasan's going to be pissed off about that. Hasan pressed. I think if he shows up and it's for
Landlord. Landlord. Dude, Matan is just one of those people who's like kind of annoying, not funny all the time, but when he hits, he hits. So good, man.
For this, it's going to blow your mind. In Germany, it is technically not illegal to try to escape prison. Did you know this?
No, I didn't know that.
Because under the German understanding of human law, they believe that obviously all men want freedom. So it is a perfectly natural
Name
and
10
perfectly
bucks.
valid response to being apprehended and being put in prison. So technically, when you do try to escape prison in Germany, if you do actually escape prison in Germany, the only charges they will add on is if you are escaping with the state's clothes. Like if you're wearing prisoner garb, they will say,
Effectively stealing.
yeah, like in America, if you obviously try to escape prison, like that's a charge in and of itself. In Germany, they don't even have that. They don't consider that to be an additional offense to add onto your record because they consider that to be the natural predisposition of humans that they want to be free. It's just the reason why I brought it up is because like a lot of laws are designed around the culture.
You see, resisting arrest is a bullshit charge because it's the natural predisposition of humans to want to be free. I'm gonna lose it, bro. Why do people watch this guy? This is so crazy.
And whatever our material conditions are, whatever we want the criminal justice system to do. And that is precisely the reason why the application of like things such as trespassing or things such as like lawful dispersal are oftentimes simply charges that we've created so the state can suppress free speech without, you know, saying we are doing this because we don't like what you're saying. But that doesn't change the reality that it's a bullshit charge, a tack-on charge, or a charge that they're using specifically to actually violently suppress free speech.
Yeah, Asmon's pushing back.
I don't agree with that. I don't, because like there are a lot of instances where they're trying to arrest somebody and a person is actively trying to fight them and stop them from arresting them. Like, how can you have a world where that's acceptable? Like, wouldn't that massively endanger the lives of every single police officer?
It depends on which country we're talking about, I guess. But
I mean, like, yeah, I mean, whatever Germany does is what they're going to do. But it's like I can't see a world where being able to resist arrest is like not going to lead to massive risks of violence against police officers.
it's the application.
It's not even just violence against police officers. If there's other civilians in the area and someone's resisting arrest, it creates a danger for them too.
Of the law.
It's not just about the fucking
I think that there should
police
be probably a
officers.
higher standard for things such as this, because obviously, like, as long as it's not violent, as long as it's not like genuinely causing harm to others, I think that a trespass law in this situation, especially because it is public land, trespass in this circumstance is, in my opinion, not meeting the standard of violent state apprehension. If it was something else, if these students were like beating the randomly out of like students that are walking around, then well, you have a specific charge for that, right?
Yeah.
I think that trespass is just a bullshit one to use in this circumstance, especially after the vice chancellor, hours prior to the sweep, actually went and sat down with the students. And
Are
in
you
that
talking
conversation,
about in UCLA?
yeah. And
Okay.
and the vice chancellor made it seem as though they were doing this to protect the students. They were claiming that you know, they wanted police presence there to protect the students. And the students kept asking him whether there would be a sweep at all, because police presence in this circumstance
This
would not
sucks. This
actually
fucking blows. This blows. Hasan is yapping so hard. This guy sucks.
mean safety for the students or security for the students, but the exact opposite. And he basically said, "Oh no, there won't be a sweep, or maybe there will be a sweep, but you'll be able to leave before the sweep," giving them only one option, which is leave or get beaten up. I don't think that I don't think that that's valid to do.
I think it kind of is in a lot of circumstances, and the reason why is because the alternative to that is that you are effectively holding the university hostage, and I don't think that's fair.
But they're not. Wait,
well, they kind of are. Whenever they're saying we won't leave until you do what we want, and then you can't make them leave, they are effectively holding the space hostage, are they not?
I mean, the space that they're occupying is marginal. They could even hold an actual space hostage, I guess, like if they were to go inside of a building and set up barricades and whatnot. And at which point, what I care about is what their goals are, right? Because all matter of protest is inevitably going to be disruptive. This one wasn't. That's why I think it's like truly unconscionable, the reaction from the university, and that's why there's a lot of students who are very pissed off right now at UCLA who think like,
I actually can't stomach any more of this. This is fucking painful. I can't go through and fucking check everything he's saying, so I just don't want to even fucking hear it. Oh. I wish you just fucking talk about it. Actually say your opinion on this shit. Don't fucking just spout off talking points. Why don't you talk calmly? Try and figure this out. Say what you know as well. And Asmongold needs to sit there and be like, is that true? Is that true? Every time Hasan claims something, he's like, is that true? How do you know that's true? Could you link me that? Could you send me that link? Every single time. The moment he makes any claim. If you haven't personally seen it verified, there's no reason to believe anything he's saying because he just gets everything wrong and lies all the fucking time. Even just in this, we saw. Just totally misrepresenting shit.